Chief Architect, Department of Urban Planning, Chandigarh Administration, and Dr. Sandeep Goyal, Founder, Patron, LEGACY and CCA Chandigarh. Further, I would like to invite Dr. Principal, Chandigarh College of Architecture, to please deliver a presentation titled The Life of the Town.
Good morning, everyone. It gives me immense pleasure and a great sense of satisfaction when I see this room, our studio at CCA, finally occupied with the students, our special guests today. And with this, I also want to commemorate the 125th birth anniversary of none else but the humblest soul of the city, from whom we all today should learn from his experience. So, Pierre Jeanneret is a craftsman for you. He is much ahead of his times, and with his modest ways, he has given an example to us which we can emulate, pass on to our students. So it says, from chaos doth the cosmos emerge. And who doesn't know that we are all refugees, we are all children of refugees who were here from the partition. I will not go to the story of the partition, which all of us have read immensely. Just a sort of homage to the martyrs and to the strong men, women, children that came across the borders to set up the new land. The map of India that had Lahore as part of it, and then the new map that signaled the arrival of a new dawn, or perhaps the loss of dawn. Before Chandigarh could be envisioned, there was a team of Novicki and Albert Mayer. But because Novicki, the architect, died in an air crash, Albert Mayer developed bold feet and the search for the new architect began. And the Nehruvian vision of modernism brought in Corbusier. The two actors to the stage were these, because Corbusier said, I would only come to Chandigarh if you brought Pierre Jeanneret with me. That was the fact. And do we see Jeanneret playing a second fiddle? No, never. It is a foil to balance Cobb's flashes of genius with painstaking methodological precision. And that is what the two did. So while we credit the checkerboard plan and the 7 B's to Le Corbusier, who did the infill of the fabric of the city, which you and I, my dear friends, enjoy? It is Pierre Jeanneret. Spending an immense part of his life, the mature period of his life in Chandigarh, Jeanneret gave to us the streets we enjoy, the houses we live in, the buildings we inhabit, the schools we studied in, the colleges we went to, the university. The city had a huge city building agenda. We had to house people, and the mandate was government housing of 13 types, right from the peon to the minister. And all this was the work of the tribe. The tribe was an husband and wife team, the British architects James and Maxwell Fry, who had worked in the tropics at Ghana and built Abuja, the Ibadan University. And having this immense interest in working in the tropics, it was a 3-year contract to come to Chandigarh. Along with him was none else but the humble Pierre Jeanneret. So this is the terrific trio to whom we credit the fabric of our city, the city that we live and inhabit. There was immense work lying ahead, waiting for it to be done, because the city had to be realized from the start, from the start. And what was the genre of buildings? It was healthcare, it was hospitals, it was schools, it was maternity centers, and it was 13 house types. And it was the PGI area. One of the earliest buildings, Pratap Singh Nehru was there, who was really the brain behind the development of PGI as a center for healthcare and advanced learning. So with this, what was there? We had nothing. No money, no techniques, no machinery. All that we had was a shoestring budget. We had a complete reliance on indigenous materials. And what did we fabric out of it? The most beautiful Chandigarh style of architecture. Just the simple use of brick, the simple use of bands of plaster, stored from the cupboard, was what we did. And see, the largest of houses to the smallest had the same vocabulary. Even the private houses, there were some well-to-do people who wanted to settle in Chandigarh. And who were their private architects? They were the government architects. So Pierre Jeanneret also designed some of the most beautiful villas that he was. And then there was Le Corbusier's work. So this work was also part of Jeanneret's work. The detailing, because Corbusier only visited Chandigarh thrice a year. And with that fact, the rest of the actual implementation, the site work, the groundwork, was the work of Pierre Jeanneret, who would painstakingly cycle through the city and look at the buildings. So whether they were the facades of the Secretariat or the curvilinear perforated walls, it was all the vector of his work. Whether there was a response to climate or there was art, it was all meant to be a dedication to the city. Because it was to be the symbol of a newfound freedom. And that's what you see. They did not just make buildings. They put in furniture, furnishings, carpets, uplighters, curtains. You name it. Normally architects are credited with buildings. But here was an architect who said, my camera must see inside out. So he had 7 cameras. Pierre Jeanneret had 7 cameras, all the time slung around his neck on the bicycle, moving through the city. Again, the materials were very simple, but the creation of a modernist architecture and the learnings from the idea of light. Even till date, photographers come to Chandigarh in certain seasons because they wish to replicate these age-old photographs. Today also these buildings exist. And my dear friends, with the landscape in place, you and I are enjoying them. So while during the day they worked in the old architect's office in Sector 90 and experimented with brick, with clay, with terracotta, it was during the evenings that the gentleman went to where his heart was, the university. Because we had lost the university to Lahore, so there was a pain in us which needed to be there. The library. I'm sure everyone in this room has often been haunted in these areas. The Punjab University Library, Urban, the Fine Arts Museum, the administrative block, the garden, the closest to his heart. So as I mentioned earlier, the furniture, the fitments, all became a part and parcel of Jeanneret's life. And that's what he would do. He would learn from nature, he would learn from the local neighbor, and he would read an extensive reader, and then he would experiment. And where was all this coming from? This was coming from an earlier alliance with Charlotte Perrin, who said, Corbusier, Pierre and I are 3 fingers on the hand. She went off to Japan and Jeanneret came to Japan. But Charlotte's memory stayed. Furniture of all kinds using indigenous material. Woven, skillfully, boatmen. So there's absolutely no dearth if somebody wants to investigate or wants to explore. Where is art in everyday architecture? It's the architecture of everyday people, the common man. The insignia of the city is found on very utilitarian items, and the simplicity is what he gave to us. Simplicity in the interior and the exterior to create, and from very simple materials. At the time that he was bidding farewell to the city, the Malis came to give him flowers. He was made farewell by craftsmen, by the masons. He was a man of the common. He was a king of our hearts. And that, my dear friends, is a collage that was given to him on his 60th birthday and titled Birthday Project by all the employees who worked with him in the architect's office. And a little line here that I'd like to read. On the right it said, whether married, it says yes, and to architecture. For all these, I would like to and based on records, all the photographs here are from the archives of the Canadian Centre for Architecture, Montreal, and some from the Foundation of Lucia, who have sent us congratulatory messages on the occasion and also generously allowed us to use of these speeches. Thank you.
In the life of Pierre Jeanneret. I would now like to invite architect Dr. Setia to enlighten us to the works together.
Good morning, everyone. Again, Sunil Goyal, Principal of Sangeeta Mehta, Faculty students. I think I must congratulate the college for starting the college on a very auspicious day. This is the 125th anniversary of Pierre Jeanneret, and we owe a lot of our present to this practical way of building the architecture of the city. I think most of the contributions have already been highlighted by Sangeeta, and I'm going to practically repeat these because the amount of work he has done is difficult to map and scale in such a short time. It is a work of more than 15 years, with more than 50 years of experience behind it. They came at the age when they had seen post-industrial developments all around the world, and from all the experience that what we need to build a city which has almost become a landmark. I'm just going to talk about the versatility of this man. He started by contributing to the urban planning layouts. This is one of the layouts he did for Sector 22, which is now a heritage sector. And this, the simplicity with which they kind of made the drawings and understood the scale on which the city was perceived is what has to be understood and learned and explored. We see a lot of people coming here and understanding that this probably came in as a grid, but the contribution which generated was much more than what the entire team would reflect in the longer run. You would leave the whole show from the front. The entire experience of coming to a new place, understanding the culture, understanding the traditional ways of construction, knowing the construction technology, and then adapting it to what the dreams of the museum were, was a difficult challenge. And the museum would only come once in a while. This is another layout of the sector where the drawing by Jeanneret himself, which basically maps out the way the development was conceived. The drawings were in the early 50s when the project started initiating. So the man had vision to handle both urban planning, architecture, and in a way that really reflects what we now call as Chandigarh style of architecture. The buildings are just not what we perceive, because within the constraints of time, and they almost become immortal in the sense that we now live through them. A very simple functional plans, So there's all proportionate to the modeler which they were all trying to explain, and we experience it in every element of the city design. There are different typologies of housing which we have all seen. There are actually 14 typologies and not 13 which we mostly say. And there are more than 30,500 houses which we built in a very short span. And that was the first way of building a capital. Since there was no housing in the city, all that was only to bring in the. Here he proved that what finally matters in the expression of the architecture is the material. How they handle the material, the equation, what the material really style of architecture was kind of built on. So from the largest houses with simple materials, common handmade, using the typologies, and even using prefab at times. So he used all ways of handling the architecture depending on what kind of work is required. Whether we go from very big houses, the chief minister's houses, to this Jeanneret house and this house where we are having a particular museum and Jeanneret. I will show the students to really go and really read what has been assembled in Jeanneret Museum today, so that we can pay homage to at least understand the nuances by which they build the city, the context in which they build the city. Now what we see is a much more mature method of understanding what happened in those times, but it was a clean slate situation where they were just trying to build a vocabulary which has almost become a pattern across the country for our time, if not this region, across the country. So it was a very motivating kind of a process which they went through. There were struggles, there were challenges. It was not a very easy thing. And of course, they also made mistakes. It's not that they were all perfect and never made mistakes. There are many, many mistakes which you can find when you keep going through processes. But he really led them all from the front. He took all the challenges of handling how to get this idea of the museum really getting it implemented, because the museum had a very, very firm mind, and he would really try to talk to the Prime Minister direct and tell him that his ideas are not being implemented. But this humble man would make sure that everybody goes along with the system, and he would visit the sites on his cycle and ensure that the detailing that they are doing gets implemented at site, even when there were no technical hands on field. But I must accept that the challenges with the Indian engineers and the whole team, the support which the bureaucracy gave was no less. They all really supported the team wholeheartedly, and that made it possible for this project to come. So it would not have been possible had the political and the executive had not been there for to agree to their plans. The houses, as these are the houses which there was not one category of one typology. There were many architectural designs for different sites, and they all became their own patterns. I think you must all be knowing that the alphabet J is what Jeanneret represents. Like there are different typologies of J, B. So there are different typologies of design which we create with different materials, different textures, and the whole plan was very climate responsive. The inside-out solutions were all there. When you look at houses which were small or which were big, all had their own share of open space, and that is what was the underlying factor of their village. Of course, the source was there. They made brick as their basic material, and they played with the brick in a very artistic way. And that really gave them a lot of climate solutions to the whole process. And this whole experience, whether those who stayed in this houses would really know what really it is to. I have heard a lot of criticism from people who come from outside and say that probably these houses are too stuffy and there are very small windows, even from people who come now. But the kind of architecture they did was more human. The scale was very human, and the experience is what really was to connect you to nature. As was earlier presented, these were the private houses they did on some, and here they tried to use better materials and better finishes. And that's what was the nostalgia of their art. They were people of the day. These are the schools which there is the typology of schools. They're basically single-loaded corridors, and the condominiums came and intermingled with the courtyards outside. The courtyards outside was very important aspect of it. Most of the schools were oriented towards the classroom was the light was in the north, and there was shaded corridors in the southern part, and the fenestration. This was the humble nursery which they built in 2 or 3 initial schools, 7, 16, and 22. And it was to the scale of the inhabitants who would use it. And they would use these elements like to bring in elements of structure on the elevations and the material typology in that. But on his own, and I think it's a wonderful symbol for what Chandigarh is represented at many places. The Gandhi Bhavan truly reflected his own character. I think he got a lot of philosophies from the Gandhian way of life, and the simplicity with which he stayed and with the way he worked really brought in a lot of there are a lot of detailing in this building. If you can go and study, I think some studies have been done recently as well as prepared by Commission Architect, and the university is doing some effort to conserve these buildings. But a lot of work still needs to be done to conserve these great works of architecture. I think we need a lot of resources to handle the buildings of the administrative complex, the library, the finance museum. They are also needing a lot of intervention in terms of, and I think industry must do anything to do that. These are the hostels, right? So you can look at the typology of hostels, whether it is in the CPC 26, the MLA hostels, the hostels in the university, whatever was in demand, the site was responded well. So the introvert, the hostels for the girls in Punjab University, and then the linear hostels for boys, all gave a special kind of image for the students, and this really loved by the students who stayed and studied there. And they have that connect with these buildings whenever they come back and they respond back. This is the State Library in Sector 17, the shopping center in Sector 11 and 16. The precast brick granite was not what we used extensively, but in this case he really experimented with it and created a kind of a monotone which was not general expression at all. He would rather use many textures and materials. So the way he responded to every design was very unique. This is the additional town on Lane in 17. This is the Producer Center, the old architect's office. A very humble, temporary site, but I think the way they built it really gave it the permanence it needed, and the Producer Center has added value. The forge, kind of flexibility or the porosity of the materials they handle was also very important, and we must learn to experiment with whatever simple materials we have. There are no great craftsmen or no great topologies to calculate, but the kind of construction they did was really outstanding in that era. That's what brought a lot of. These are the kind of detailing we did for different elements. I think many of them are from the Gandhi Bhavan. Look at the kind of simplicity with which they have carved out a reading, and it is just the process of detailing which brings in some innovation in it. These structural light fixtures, even the handling the windows in a typical house brought in some sense of art into the whole process. You can see every element in the city has some reflection of this hard work and detailing. Even the paving details are well issued by for a small development in 2022. All this would not have been possible had he not worked very hard for a project which was absolutely at full peak. I think the kind of work they did in 15 years is difficult to emulate now, even if with whatever systems we have, whatever new technologies, whatever new innovations in construction methodology we have. But it is very difficult to build a building a city like this. Because these are the elements which he has already highlighted. The boat he designed was very symbolic. I think we have all lived and experienced these elements all our life, and there are many people who were. Last year, some efforts were done to kind of bring this board was even designed by the murals on each. This was some mural in school in 16. This was a very important reference point, and I think the manhole cover almost has become a range across the world. So it's very difficult to protect so many manhole covers across the city. They've become the furniture, these heritage items have become a range. The sense that they were used and the process through which these elements were experimented. And I must say that our homage to this man can only be if we try to understand the values he built for the city. and try to build on it. Not that we get stagnated with the process, but the way they understood the idea, the way the values they built on it, and then understand and build on those values. Not that we can just be stuck in the time zone, but to our sense, there is a lot of learning. The more we kind of explore in their work, we learn a lot of things which were much beyond their time space. So our work should also have the vision and the idea which brings in future into the mind, and that's a very difficult thing. The whole architecture they did was what we now call as green architecture, but it was a very, very environmental friendly architecture, and that's what brings in. Whatever idea we say, whether we had this pandemic here, the kind of openness of the sun space, the green they offered us made it much more easier to sustain the city than what we would have done had we gone in the new methods of development, the way we usually developing. I think this is a quote which I have taken from, says that in many ways Chandigarh feels the impact of January was more than it does for bigger user. But it is he who has designed a mask of humbler dwellings around which the daily life of common man is to. That's what reflects this man's experience in the city. And the way you can look at the picture below, the way in front of what he is expressing to Nehru after the inauguration of Gandhi Bhavan, I think he really lived the life where he said truth is God. That's what I say. That I congratulate the college, the entire team to paying homage to this great man, and we wish that we can all contribute from the learnings of this man and build on this. Thank you.
He brought in the human element into Chandigarh, no doubt about that. I will now request Dr. Sandeep Goyal to introduce a new venture related to the works of Lucia and Measure.
Good morning. Madam Principal, Mr. Gill, Mr. Singh, Chief Architect Setia, all my young friends and members of the faculty, I'm honored to be here. Actually, in a room full of people who actually understand design and architecture, for a man from advertising, it's going to be a bit different if nothing else. But which is where perhaps different perspectives become important when we are in a discussion. Only a couple of days ago, I had the Bulgarian ambassador to India, visiting Chandigarh, and more out of a sense of pride as a alumni of St. John's School, I took her there. I said, let me show you what a real beautiful school looks like. Well, I just had to take her there, and she had obviously read up on Chandigarh before coming. And she looks at the building, and she looks at me, and she says, this is a Pierre Jeanneret structure. I said, yes, it is. In any case, there is a plot which Ma'am and Sir, I think, have placed there. So she looks at me and she says, it's a nice building. Why don't you guys preserve it better? So I said, I think the school is doing a really good job. So she looks at me, she says, if you want to take this building down brick by brick and ship it to France, the estimated value would be anywhere between 200 million to 500 million US dollars. Now we are sitting on that kind of heritage value. When I studied in that school, of course I think the school still looks after that building pretty well. But the fact of the matter is, I don't think we understand in numerical terms, in rupee terms, the kind of heritage value that we are sitting on today. Which brings me to another interesting small anecdote. I had a friend from Japan. I used to work with a Japanese company who I brought him down. And in the street that I live in, Sector 21, one of the houses was just starting to be demolished. So early morning before I had even gotten up, I figured that Nakano-san is actually standing in front of that house and taking pictures. In any case, he came back serving a cup of tea. And he looked at me and said, why are you demolishing this house? So I said, well, they want to build a new house here. That's the simplest answer. He says, but why don't you, if you don't want this house, why don't you take it down brick by brick and take it to Japan? I mean, somebody over there paying you maybe $4, $5, $10 million for this fabulous house. Why are you demolishing it? So every house that comes down is millions of dollars of heritage value that we are killing for houses that were made maybe in the 60s and 70s. At the same time, I'm an architect. CCA showed all these beautiful houses in which most government people stay. And I was in the house of a very senior minister just a couple of weeks ago. And I was appalled with what they have done to that house. Appalled. I mean, the original windows have been taken off. I went in and I could see a huge amount of structural changes that have been made. I have lots of friends in the IAS and IDF over here who live in these beautiful houses in Sector 16 and in Sector 5 and so on and so forth. I mean, every time I go there, the first thing I hear from the wife of these friends is, this is a terrible house, I want this replaced and I want this taken out and I want this demolished. And I don't have the heart to tell them that you don't even know where you're staying. I mean, these houses are actually worth their weight in gold. And unfortunately, we don't seem to appreciate the value of what has been perhaps bestowed onto us. I don't know the phrase that architect CCA just used. What attitudinal? I missed that word, but attitudinal fatigue or something you said. Yeah, he calls it attitudinal fatigue, which is that we see something so often we just don't value it. It's like living in the shadow of the Eiffel Tower. I mean, I travel 20,000 miles to get there, but the guy who lives right under the Eiffel Tower thinks, what a terrible building this is. So I mean, that kind of fatigue has perhaps set into the city, and that is what is really not nice. Each of those schools, those government schools that we saw, this one in Sector 22 and Sector 11 and so Sector 10, absolutely fabulous buildings. Absolutely fabulous buildings. Now, I have been told, in my discussions with your friends, that there are enough funds at, UNICEF or the Aga Khan Foundation that perhaps our administration of the city should be looking at to bring in, to restore, preserve, and keep the sanctity of some of these buildings. Now, I can't really do that. That's the job of the administration. But what we have done is today we are formally launching a small forum. It's a study forum. A forum called the LEGACY of Pierre Jeanneret Forum. What is it going to be? It is going to be a forum for those who love Chandigarh. And I'm not going to make it any bigger than that. It's just a forum for those who love Chandigarh. I have requested the Honorable Chief Architect that he should bless this by becoming the Chief Patron. And I have already requested Madam Principal here if the College of Architecture can be the academic partner for whatever we plan to do. What is it that we want to do or what is it that we plan to do? I worked with, for example, with Mr. Manoj Parida, the advisor, a few days ago. And 2 days ago when he was inaugurating the installation we set up in Matka Chowk, he formally again said it that he wants to help, for example, in doing up the island in the lake. And now that's an interesting idea. Why do I say that? Even the installation we put up in Matka Chowk, except for rock garden, which came because nature surreptitiously started creating some, pieces of art, and then they became mainstream, and then everybody said, wow, what a great idea, and so on and so forth. We haven't really added much to what these gentlemen created 60, 70 years ago. So I think we now need a wave of active, proactive involvement with the city, where some of us come together to start first preserving and archiving what we have, and to looking at creating newer and more interesting things which help the city to evolve. So in this forum, I am also going to be working, I spoke to Madam Deepika Gandhi on the museum that she has created for Pierre Jeanneret in Sector 5. So we will do some interesting things there, whatever we can to add value to that museum. But the biggest one is where I have requested Madam Principal that we can have some of you students join us and some of the faculty to join us, where we now get into a micro project actually to photographs. I mean, you have some beautiful pictures there, but if we were to go actually into each one of those 13 or 14 types of houses, I was asking sir if we can create those same miniatures or whatever, those two-scale buildings that you create. We must create them. Those have to be part of that museum, I can't go see all the 14 types of houses, but when I go to the museum, I should be able to see this is the humblest, it is slightly bigger, to find the Chief Minister's house and all the variety of J sections or whatever, that he created. They should be visible at one go. Those are the kind of small things we need to do. All of those blueprints that he created, they should be available with explanation to show where is the light coming from, how was this angularized, how was this climate friendly, how is it climate responsive. So I am requesting for 10 students to join us on this project. We will help out whatever equipment is required to shoot, archive and to put together, and then we will see whatever we can do with it, including publishing a good book, making some nice videos, uploading them on YouTube, having our own channel and so on and so forth. I have also tied up, and I am making an announcement today with the Indian Express group, where we are launching a contest called Chandigarh's Most Beautiful Buildings. So these would also be institutional buildings. It will be all those beautiful houses we've seen and all the private houses that came up 60, 70 years ago. So that contest will kick off in the next couple of weeks, and Indian Express have promised us that they will feature and write nice stories about each of those dwellings, what went into them, and get expert advice from people who fully understand that. So that's going to be a fairly large project for us going forward. I want to reiterate, this is a purely not-for-profit forum. My friend Professor Abninder Chopra, who is the head of the English department at DAV College, will be the first honorary secretary of the forum. And we are going to take this off starting today. The only very last thing I want to say, because Sangeeta said we've got to be brief and short, is that while it's nice to put in all of these efforts, there is an equal necessity to sensitize the people who run the city. Mr. Gill is there, and I don't want to mince words. But Mr. Gill, Saturday morning we had Mr. Manoj Parida inaugurate an installation for which I paid ₹1 crore at the Matka Chowk. In less than 24 hours, the guys from the Chandigarh Smart City came and have dug up their entire chowk. They have gone under the installation, they have broken the wires. I called up somebody very senior in the hierarchy of the Smart City. The first thing he tells me, why are you calling me on a Sunday? I said, because it's an emergency. So he said, so what can I do about it? I said, you're a civil servant. This is part of your job. Can you please call these guys and stop them from digging? I said, they are going under my installation. That installation is worth ₹1 crore and is now a part of the landmark of the city. So he says, you are bothered about beautification. I have to create a smart city. My point is, no efforts at the private or even the public level can succeed if officialdom, if government servants don't first understand the incredible amount of heritage value this city is sitting on. I think first and foremost, and I am going to tell Advisor Parida, we need to have a workshop on sensitizing civic and city officials to the fabulous heritage that we are sitting on. I mean, an attitude like that in Japan or in any other part of the world would be inexcusable. It breaks my heart. I mean, 2 days ago I was in New yesterday I didn't know how to react. I mean, in comes a bunch of 20-odd guys digging away to glory, ruining something that we spent 3 years making. But I don't want to get carried away. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you again, Madam Principal. Thank you, Architect Cynthia. And I do hope all of you will support the new forum we have set up. Thank you.
I would now like to call on Mr. S. S. Gill to please address the gathering.
Good morning, everyone. Here, this heritage studio. I think sitting here we can understand what lighting is and what beautiful thing has been built. Mr. Setia and prior to that, Mr. Bakka brought about the heritage we are sitting on and the beauty, and I appreciate your sentiment. I really appreciate your sentiment because even I belong to the city. So I have come back after a long search and now been posted in the city, but I can understand the passion that you carry, and I really appreciate what you've started because I do feel that we are unable at times, we are not able to understand heritage, what we have. You know, this is a city, sometimes you don't even understand the old jewelry which your grandmother gave. Am I right? पहला आइडिया होता है इसको तोड़ के कुछ और बनाना. Am I right? Talk about it, let me get something new, which is trendy or something. So maybe that's a mindset which we all have, and probably that's what affects all of us. But I do agree that we need to sensitize, like Mr. Goyal said, that we need to sensitize all the hierarchy of this administration about the gold mine which we are sitting on. In fact, I would request Mrs. Bakka and Chief Architect, if you can just elaborate on this presentation, what you had. I would make sure that this would at least percolate down to everyone in the administration, and we can have, once the COVID situation improves, we can have more and more students who belong to this city. Incidentally, Mr. Amrinder Chopra, I am also a pass out of PAV college. So I have a lot of sentiment invested in this city. So what we can do is we can start a series of programs. I think once this situation permits it, that starting from students in schools, colleges, because they are the future of this city. And though the administration needs to be sensitized, but what is the carry around this presentation to almost everyone? I really like your idea about making those small models. I think when I was not aware कि 11 टाइप में कि A, B, J, D होता है, उसे देखा था आपने कभी बताया नहीं हमको. So what I'm trying to see, I would always see why is this 10 type or 11 type double story, why is this single story, but it never struck me that apparently he had planned it. So I think the heritage what we are sitting on needs to be taken to the masses. And how do we go about it? We can, I'm a part of it because being part of education, I can take it down to the, and I would definitely like to contribute to this work in my personal capacity and in my capacity as Secretary of Education. And I do appreciate your sentiment. I'm not, you did mince words, but when you say it with passion, I understand the passion. I do agree that. And welcome back to the first day in college.
Well, at the moment today, yes.
लगता है शायद कहीं आखिरी दिन ना हो. After this, we are going to take a decision because the numbers are spiraling.
So that's why we requested you to come before the meeting so that
Yes.
you would meet them.
Okay. So I like to keep it informal. Another day where I would like to come and interact with all of you. Because I love interacting with the next generation because you are the future of this country. Old froggies like us will be soon thinking about retirement and how they build their cuckoo's nest and try to retrieve. So another day maybe I would like to interact with all of them. Maybe once this COVID situation improves. So thank you very much. Mr. Goyal, I must appreciate the thing what you started. Very, very